welcome back to another special edition of the Power Hour. And I'm pleased to be joined by none other than the man himself, Mr. Greg Tepper. Last time I called you the man, the myth, the legend.
I was gonna say that's a lot to live up to. I don't know if I'm worthy of that, but I appreciate you giving me a call.
You're doing a good job, man. I tell you, we're definitely big fans of you down here in East Texas, and I'm sure all around the state you have, a lot of followers. But we're here just to kind of talk about the upcoming by-district round we have coming up this Thursday, actually starting tomorrow, and Friday and Saturday a little bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about these Texarkana teams that we have entering in the playoffs. We have 3 local teams who will be playing in the playoffs this week. You have Pleasant Grove, who plays tomorrow night against the Van Vandals. You have the Liberty Isle Leopards, who will face off Friday night in Hallsville against the Center Rough Riders. And you have the Texas High Tigers, who will face the Terrell Tigers here at home at Grimm Stadium this upcoming Friday. So we'll start with the game tomorrow, Mr. Tepper. Kind of talk about the Hawks. I know they had a kind of fluctuating season, kind of started out a little slow with a few difficult teams, but they hit the ball rolling after a certain point. So kind of talk about their season and what do you expect from PG heading into the playoffs?
Yeah, Pleasant Grove is one of those teams that, especially once they get to the playoffs, that they seem to get more dangerous. It happened last year. You remember how slow they started last year. Get into the playoffs, get on a roll, and I would expect them to do the same in this year's playoffs. Now, one of the things that's interesting about them is I think they are the perfect characterization of the fact that out east, especially the 4A level, there are no off dates in the playoffs. I mean, you have to be ready to go right out of the chute, and they've got a tough squad going up against Van. Now, we know what Pleasant Grove's all about. We know they got to play making defense. We know they're going to run the ball. Jalen Borley, Spencer Danner. I also think that their ability to throw the ball is maybe not on par with those title teams, but it is improved. And I think that that's a really important aspect to this particular Van team, or this particular PG team. Going up against Van, and Van's a really interesting team. I think their offense is really legit. Their sophomore quarterback, Jackson Moffitt, has been very strong all year long. They've got a great young core of receivers led by guys like Caden Rowe. The question for them is their defense, because their defense has run real hot and cold. When their defense is good, they're great. In their 6 wins, they've given up about 15 points a game. You can live with that, especially with the offense they got rolling out there. But their 4 losses, they've given up 44 points a game. So their defense runs real hot and cold. I think PG's got to be your favorite in this one, especially with that pedigree. I said it last year that I think that the entire state made a big mistake by letting that young PG team hang around and get all that experience. I think this is when that experience starts to pay dividends here in the playoffs, and I think that PG is going to be your favorite in this game against Van.
So one other quick question I want to ask you about PG. They are the second place team out of District 7 4A behind Gilmer. We have Liberty Isle coming in third. I know when PG and Gilmer opened the district slate against each other to start the district slate, you guys had PG as a 1-point favorite in that game, actually. Kind of talk about, were you surprised by the outcome of that game and maybe the makeup of the district overall? Is that a surprise to you or not?
A little bit. I think just the way that Gilmer really went out there, and especially with the defensive side, really dominated that game. They were the defense was the dominant force for Gilmer in that game. Now, I'd love to see it again. We may not get to see it again. What's interesting, that Region 2 is so dangerous, regardless of where you are. But if you want to say that there's a small silver lining to losing that game to Gilmer, you wouldn't have to see Carthage until a regional final. They're going to have to go through a team like Caddo Mills, maybe a team like Aubrey, maybe a team like Liberty Isle if they get hot. But so there's no off weeks regardless, but you can make an argument that losing that game was a small blessing because you wouldn't have to see Carthage until later in the day. So I think that speaks really to the overall strength of District 7 4A Division 2. We knew it was going to be good, but I think what you saw in that game, it was on display that you have 2 of probably at least the top 10, maybe the top 5 teams in the state within that district.
So let's switch it over to the other team out of District 7 4A here locally. You have the Liberty Isle Leopards, who I happen to be the play-by-play announcer for. Got hot early to start the season, to be honest with you. I mean, I know the strength of schedule wasn't as dominant as it might have been a couple years back when they faced the Waco La Vegas, the Argyles teams and such. But you still had a pretty decent schedule, a couple 5A schools like Mount Pleasant, Sulphur Springs, but they started out 5-0, lost 4-0, lost to Sulphur Springs that 5th game. And then, the district came around and you start 1-0 with Spring Hill, and then you get the two big dogs in the district. But kind of talk about their season. How do they think they did this season? And kind of talk about them. They have Center Rough Riders coming in. They're both 7-3 overall. We know Center's coming in from that district with Carthage. So that, you never know what you get after Carthage. But kind of talk about that game and how do you think Liberty Island will fare coming into the playoffs?
I think what Coach Davis has done there at Liberty ILO is really impressive. And I think it's very clear that they've taken a clear step forward this year. Very obvious. And I think you don't have to look too far. I think most especially, I think that defense has really come along from last year. The defense was what cost them, I thought, about last year. This year, it's gone from being a liability to being a real strength. They can win games. They can win games. That you go back to that game against Paris, 28-0 that is a Paris program that wants to just pound you, that wants to really dominate you up front, and they played their game and beat them at it. And I think that's a strength. You go back to what they did defensively. I think that win over Atlanta has aged really well. This is a quality ball club, and their defense has been very, very good all year long. But I also think that their offense is starting to come along past couple of weeks. The schedule lightened up with Pittsburgh and North Lamar, but you still put up some big offensive totals. I think that offense is starting to play its best football. They will need to play their best football, and their defense will need to be on point. Going up against center.
Yeah.
This center team, they can go.
Yeah.
Okay? They can go. This is one of the most just explosive, dynamic, powerful, dangerous offenses that you're going to find in Texas high school football. Their junior quarterback in Monty Cross is a star. They run the ball well with Caden Dixon. They've got playmakers all over the field like Jamarian Evans out wide. And I mean, their offensive line's good. I mean, their offense can hum. Now, they can be a bit defense optional sometimes. And so a lot of this game, in many respects, is going to be dictated by pace. It's going to be dictated, I would say it's strange to say, considering we're talking about a Liberty ILO team that defensively struggled last year. But I think if you're Liberty ILO, you're hoping to get into just some low-scoring slugfest and kind of outslug them, and keep this game in the 20s or maybe low 30s. If this game gets into the 40s and the 50s, I like Liberty ILO, but I don't like them in a game like that because they don't want to start trading scores with a team like that because center's not going to miss. That's the thing for them. If this game's in the high 20s, low 30s, I think Liberty ILO is in a great spot. If this game's in higher than that, into the high 30s or the 40s, then at that point you're playing a dangerous game against a team that wants to play with fire and wants to get out and run. So keep this game, take the air out of the football, and I think Liberty ILO's got a shot. But I think center's probably your favorite just because that offense has been humming so much.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. Seeing, I've watched a little film on them just, for game prep, and man, averaging 40, almost 50 points a game. They put up 70 a couple times this season. Even last Friday, they put up 70 on Brownsboro. You're like you say, this defense, and they are well improved on the Leopard side, but this is probably going to be the ultimate test outside of facing a team like Gilmer earlier in this year.
That's exactly right. And now that's the advantage for them, is that they've faced high-powered offenses like Gilmer, right? Now Gilmer put up some numbers. How much have they improved since then? Going up against what's probably going to be the second highest powered offense that they've seen, or maybe better than Gilmer. I mean, who knows? But this is a real test for just how far that Liberty ILO defense has come, and it should be a great matchup.
Last question I got for you before I let you go: Texas High Tigers. The Tigers, pretty dominant this season, to say the least. I mean, they've had ups and downs throughout the year, especially throughout the district. A couple of those district games were closer than probably the fans and Coach Stanford's liking. But overall, Texas High put a good product on the field. They did lose the season opener down to Frisco Lone Star. But outside of that, they've been pretty good. Lost their starting quarterback, Cody Reese, in the third game of the season or so. I know they're in a new region. So I'm going to talk about, what do you see them doing? I know they're facing more Dallas schools, more so in the past, and they've been down in that Houston area. Just kind of talk about, what do you expect from the Tigers, and how do you think their region will pan out as well?
Yeah, Texas High is hard to get a read on, simply because the way that they finished this year, They started off really hot, even with that loss to Frisco Lone Star. The next week when they go beat Colleyville Heritage, I thought was very impressive. They have a couple wins over 6A programs. I mean, they've really been rolling. And then they get out of their open date and they go 3-1 down the stretch, but every one of those games is close. They have a 7-point win over Marshall, a 3-point win over Knack. They have a 3-point win over Pine Tree, and then they have that loss to White House, which is a close game as well. I guess there's two ways to view it. One, they haven't exhibited that kind of dominance that we've kind of hoped to see from a team that looks like a regional contender. But on the other hand, they do have experience in close games, and they've won a lot of them. And if that's a skill, then they've certainly got that skill. The offense is going to need to start playing its best football. The offense has been a little bit MIA in at least 2 of their last 3 games. They're going to need to start stepping up against, starting this week against a Terrell team that, out of the DFW Metroplex, that is, their defense is not fantastic, but they can score a little bit. And this was a team that kind of on the opposite end, they got hot late. They started 1-4, and it really looked like things might go cattywampus on them. But they figured it out once they got to district play. They got a couple of really nice wins, including a win over Denison, and their offense really came alive. That's going to be the question for Texas High: is can they control that? Can they score enough to kind of outscore their opponent, or outscore Terrell, and can that offense kind of come alive and find whatever they need to get it done? And you're right, it's going to be a strange path for them, simply because look, I think Grim Park is probably worth a touchdown by itself. Just being at home, I think, really helps. That's a long road trip for Terrell, and I think that's a nice home field advantage that Texas High has there. But then you're dealing with a second round matchup with a team like Everman out of the DFW Metroplex. You're getting into DFW real quick. Yeah. And Everman, then probably a team like Melissa, who's a state ranked team, or maybe Ennis. And then if you were to get past that, you're dealing with maybe the defending state champs in South Oak Cliff, or Lovejoy or Midlothian Heritage. Region 2 is a bear, and they're going to have to earn it every single week, including this week. That said, I do think at home especially, that's a nice advantage for Texas High, and I would expect them to be favorites this week against Terrell.
Who do you think out of the 3 local teams that are in the playoffs? I know this is probably a crazy question, might be a little difficult one. Who would you say is maybe the favorite possibly to actually contend for a title out of Texas High, Liberty, out of Pleasant Grove? Who do you think has the best chance or shot to actually compete for a title?
It's hard to say, but the one thing I would say is you take a look at both Pleasant Grove and Liberty Ilo. I think that those are probably, I think that I would put them as favorites ahead of Texas High, simply because Texas High is going to have to deal with such a brutal region. And I think that they match up a little bit, but they're also going to have to go through, at some point, Gilmer or Carthage, and to a lesser extent, a team like Aubrey, right? The schedule is more difficult for those teams. If you were to ask me right now, I'd say Pleasant Grove. Pleasant Grove is the team that's got the pedigree. They're still young and growing, and they've got that playoff experience. It would not be a surprise to me to see Liberty Ilo make a run. I think they're a surprise. They're a sleeper there that they could ruin some seasons here down the stretch. Texas High, I'm a little bit bearish on, only because of the way they finished the season, and the fact that they would have to go through a difficult region to get out of there. I could see all 3 of them making it to a third round. I could see that, and that would potentially set up a third round rematch between Pleasant Grove and Liberty Ilo, which would be a lot of fun. A long road between now and then, but I do think there's some promise, and that they are a lot closer. These Texarkana teams, I think, are a lot closer to contention than maybe, at least holistically, than they have been the past couple of years, which should make for some exciting games this week and next week at least.
I absolutely agree. I think around the state we'll have some exciting games, and we can't wait to tune in. Mr. Tepper, appreciate you for joining us once again.
Absolutely.
And you have a good rest of your week, and as always, appreciate you.
Yeah, happy to do it.
All right, man. Take it easy.